leave us a review on iTunes, or if you want to support us in a more personal way and get access to hundreds of hours of exclusive content and some cool Armed Lutheran swag, go to Unload Podcast. I cannot believe I just did that. Gee whiz, I was up late doing that.
There's the blooper for the start of the show, huh?
Bringing you law, gospel, and guns. This is Armed Lutheran Radio.
Hi folks, welcome to Armed Lutheran Radio, a show about guns, hunting, competitive shooting, the natural right of self-defense, and what God's Word says about the issues surrounding gun rights and gun ownership. I'm your host, Lloyd Bailey, the Armed Lutheran, and this is episode number 256. Thank you so much for making Armed Lutheran Radio a part of your week again this week, and thank you to those of you who are new to the show, just checking us out. I hope you enjoy what you hear today, and we'll come back and visit for more. Remember when we were all hoping that 2021 was going to be better than 2020? It had to be, right? Well, now we're double masking, and that doddering old fool President Biden is talking about how we didn't have a vaccine until he came to office, and we'll need to be masked up and social distanced for another year, and we've got anal swab tests for the virus and the mother of all snowstorms. For those of you like me in Texas and the surrounding areas where ridiculously cold weather has caused rolling blackouts and exploding water pipes, thank you so much for tuning in, and we're praying for your speedy recovery. We did finally see some warmer temperatures here in North Texas. It got above freezing for the first time in over a week on Friday. We had one day where we had a high of 3 and another where we got up to 0, and we had wind chills at one point at around 20 below. And midweek, I got up to go upstairs to my office to work and found that it was -5 outside. Now, our northern listeners in places like Pastor Bennett's home, Minnesota, might be shrugging your shoulders at such complaints, but here in Texas, this is not like anything that we've ever seen in our lifetimes. I mean, I've been in Texas 8 years, and in those 8 years, I could probably count the number of snow days on one hand. Usually if we did get snow, we'd get a dusting, and then that would be gone the next day. Maybe you'd see if it was really bad and we got a couple of inches, you might see some faint remnants of snow hiding in the shade, next to people's houses for a day or two, but that was it. But this past week, we had snow 3 times in 3 days and snow on the ground for a solid week. Now, back when I lived in North Carolina, that was not uncommon in the winter. I mean, and we were used to worrying about freezing pipes and, having to wrap the pipes up and leaving water running. It's just something we were used to, but not here. Not even counting the pictures I've seen in social media and in the news from around the state. We've had neighbors here in our neighborhood who had pipes burst and appliances frozen and ceilings collapsed due to broken pipes. And even our former contributor, Aaron Israel, I think it was his grandfather, who had a pipe burst in his home, and Aaron had to put all that CrossFit training to use, hauling out wet carpet out of his house. So others have been suffering rolling blackouts as the power grid here in Texas just got strained to the limit, trying to keep up with demand. Down south towards Houston, one of 2 nuclear reactors actually shut down because one of the cooling pipes, the pipes that delivered cooling water froze. So they shut one of the reactors down and ended up having to run at half power. Wind and solar farms failed, and traditional fossil fuel plants couldn't keep up with the demand. Water treatment plants failed, forcing parts of the state to issue boil water orders to their citizens. Blackouts were leaving people without lights or heat. Fortunately, we live in a neighborhood that is very close to a nursing home, so thank you, old people. We didn't have our power go out at any point. We weren't subject to any of the rolling blackouts, but we had neighbors in nearby communities who were seeing 20 minutes on and 2 or 3 hours off, and so awful stuff. Meanwhile, we discovered that the Regulatory Commission, the board, ERCOT, I don't remember what it stands for. They're the commission that oversees the power grid, and they make the recommendations, and they're the ones that mandated the rolling blackouts. Well, their chairman and vice chairman and 3 of the members of that board don't even live in Texas. That got people riled up. And the chairman lives in Michigan, so he's not even close. So, for all the big talk in Texas about secession and we're going to be our own country again, we damn near collapsed because of a snowstorm. So, anyway, wherever you are, I just hope that you are warm and you are safe and that things start to get better for you soon. But before we get started with today's show in earnest, we're going to talk a little. I want to do some mailbag stuff today, answer some long overdue listener email. Before I do that, though, I do want to take a minute and thank the awesome men and women who are making this show possible, the members of the Reformation Gun Club. Armed Lutheran Radio is listener funded, and that means that we don't have any advertising. Aside from this little shout out, you are not going to hear any ads or any sponsors or anything like that on the show. We rely on the monthly and yearly contributions of our members to make ends meet and keep the show going. And this week, I want to give a shout out to David from Milford, Connecticut, Eric, Greg from Holly, Michigan, Gavin from Hickory, North Carolina, Donnie from White Bear Lake, Minnesota, and our newest member, George from Junction City, Kansas. Thank you all so much for your support. I really do appreciate it, especially as crazy as these economic times have been over the past year. Really do appreciate your support. Folks, if you would like to help support the show, for as little as $1 a month, you get access to hundreds of hours of exclusive content. You get invitations to our monthly online hangouts. As I've said, one of which is we're planning for, I'm hoping, for the end of the month. Had to reschedule the one in January, and then all of this craziness happened, and so I'm thinking that we'll probably do it the end of next week. If all goes well, we'll see. But you'll get invitations to those. We try to do those every month live online. And then you get access to our cool new website. And of course, the satisfaction of knowing that you helped make all this possible. So check out all the benefits and see what it's all about, and see what exclusive content is available to members by going to armedlutheran.us/gun club. Or look for a link in the show notes for this or any of our previous episodes. All right, so as I mentioned, we're going to be getting to some mail here in a moment. With all the craziness this week, Pastor Bennett and I were not able to get together to record this week, so you're stuck with me, unfortunately. I'm sorry, but I figured I would get to some long overdue listener mail and respond to a few things that have piled up. We really do appreciate when our listeners reach out and send us their thoughts. So I thought I would take this opportunity to respond to a few. Episode 252, as was expected, kind of rustled a few jimmies. It got some people thinking, and a few people sent us their thoughts. Russ sent us one. He says, I almost hate writing this email because I don't want to be that guy, quote unquote. But in episode 252, you stated about it being incorrect to say that Biden is not my president. My objection to that statement is that if it was the thinking of George Washington and Thomas Jefferson in the 1700s about King George, our lives would not be what they are right now. The people of Germany recognized Adolf Hitler as their leader, and we all know how that worked out for the world. I agree with your opinions on Trump and most of what you said, but cannot support someone that obviously wants to rule without some of the basic morals and beliefs of Christianity. I am absolutely in no way professing civil war or even civil unrest, but I do not believe as a Christian right now we should be more I do believe as a Christian right now we should be more outspoken than ever. Just my opinion, as we both know there is only one perfect leader, but until then, I most certainly will not support a president doing immoral acts. Sorry for the rant, but it just struck a nerve. I wish I had the cure-all answer, and I truly do pray for the inspiration to do the right thing. In many ways, you are doing the right thing by being outspoken on our views of religion and morality. And yes, I still love the podcast. Signed, Russ, listening here in frigid Alaska. Russ, thank you so much for this message. And speaking of Alaska, we just finished a 7-day free trial of Alaska here in Texas, and I just want to let you know that we don't like it and we've decided to cancel. Anyway, just let me clarify a couple of things that I hope didn't come across in that episode. Respecting the office of the president while at the same time opposing his agenda is something that we as Christians absolutely have to do. Right? I don't support President Biden, and I don't recommend. And I think the idea of respecting his office, respecting him as the president, and supporting his policies or his positions are a different thing. And I hope I didn't give people the impression that we should be supportive. Biden is the president. As much as that pains me to say that, he is my president. He is our president. As much as it pained people on the left to say Trump was not, they wanted to say he wasn't their president, but he was. And while I have great reservations about the conduct of the election, at the same time, I don't have firsthand knowledge of fraud, and none has yet been proven. Doesn't mean that I don't have my doubts and I don't have concerns. It's just in keeping with the 8th commandment, I can't in good conscience say that he stole the election and that he's not my president. Joe Biden's policies and his method of governing are, in my opinion, wrong for the country, particularly his immigration policy, his climate policy, his policy on Iran, his policy on energy, his ridiculous use of executive orders. In some cases, I believe his policies are evil, particularly where it pertains to gun rights and abortion, transgenderism and racism, and his dealings with the human rights abuses of the Chinese. All of those cases, though, I still say he's my president, just like I said Obama was my president. I say he's my president with a heavy heart, however. Like the late, great Rush Limbaugh once said of Obama, I hope he fails. Not that the country fails, I hope that his policies fail. Because like many of Obama's policies, many of his policies, pretty much everything I've seen so far, are either wrong or evil. At the same time, he's my president, and I'm going to pray for him, and I'm going to hope that he comes to repentance. Now, the founders said of King George, not my king, because they were rising up and throwing off the shackles of his tyranny. They still recognized him as a king, just not their king any longer. So I think to say not my president is to invoke that same kind of revolutionary language of the founders, and I don't think we're there yet. We can't even survive Alaska-level cold snaps, much less throw off the shackles of tyranny from Washington, D.C. So it's going to take a little time. As I said in my monologue a couple of weeks ago, I don't know how this country is going to survive as a country when we don't have any shared values anymore. I don't know how long this union can stand, but I don't think we're there yet. And as long as that union does stand, I can't say not my president. It's not the same as saying that I support him. I don't. It's not the same as respecting the person in the office. Saying I respect the office, but not the person who's in the office, it's a little bit different. There's a nuance there. But as long as he holds the office, and until in the course of human events, we dissolve the political bands which connect us to the liberal elites in Washington, we need to respect the office and work through the political system that we have to oppose his policies, to work to elect people who will fight for our values and who will try to block the advance of the policies of the left. While at the same time, being mindful that a day may be coming when that's no longer possible and more drastic change is required. Russ, I hope that helps. I hope that kind of clarifies where we were coming from. I really do appreciate your reaching out. Stay warm. Thank you for continuing to listen. And thank you again for supporting the show. All right. One of our longtime Reformation Gun Club members writes, "Great conversation, guys." And he's talking about the same episode. "I'd like to add a thought to the portion where you were discussing how it would be nice to have someone as a candidate who aligned with Trump's policies but didn't possess his belligerent and sometimes even seemingly vulgar behavior. The problem is that very belligerence played a major part in why he was to successfully enact his policies and be successful in today's political and media environment. I highly doubt that a quote-unquote nice guy like Mike Pence would be able to enact even a fraction of those policies as President Trump was able to. The quote-unquote good guys throughout history haven't always possessed a squeaky clean persona. In fact, they usually don't, and he cites the examples of John the Baptist, Martin Luther, etc. The problem is those guys come far and few between. Thanks for the great show, and keep up the good work. Dallas from Severance, Colorado." Now, Dallas, one of our longtime Reformation Gun Club members, thank you so much for the message. He makes a really good point here. Trump, when you get down to it, he was not the best candidate in the field when he ran in 2016. I mean, let's face that fact. In fact, he was probably not even in the top 10. In terms of his speech-making abilities, his grasp of the issues, his understanding of conservative values, in pure political terms, he probably had no business being on that stage. But he had something that the others lacked. He has charisma. He has a way to kind of manipulate and to lead people, to manipulate people in through the media. He has a very good grasp on that. But he also had spine. He wasn't afraid to say things that in today's polite society, people would think are too risky to bring up in public debate. He wasn't above calling people names or calling people out. He was willing to be tough and brash and say things that, let's face it, most of America were wishing that our candidates would say. When we wish that George W. Bush had been tough enough to say some of those things for 8 years while the media and the left were calling him everything but a white person. W thought it was beneath the office to respond to nasty attacks from the left, and that became, at first you kind of respected that, right? But all it did was embolden his critics and it got worse and worse and worse, and eventually it became really, really frustrating for people who supported him. Trump, though, was willing to give as good as he got, and that's what his supporters liked. And he was sometimes willing to give more than he got. He wasn't above punching below the belt when he felt it necessary, and he never let an attack go without a response. And that's why so many people gravitated to him. And that's exactly right. That's what Dallas is pointing out here, that, yeah, he had that kind of brash and sometimes vulgar side to him, but it's part of what made him successful, and that's true. So yeah, what we need is kind of a hybrid. We need a guy with Pence's character who's willing to fight dirty. Somebody who won't sit and say stupid stuff on Twitter all day, who can effectively communicate conservative values and ideas, who has godly personal character. Now, I'm not saying perfect character. Obviously everybody's flawed. We're not talking about a perfect person here, but just maybe somebody who's not got a history of sleeping around on their wife and making shady business deals, maybe something like that. But somebody who's willing to hit back when the critics get ugly and say things that are not politically correct when it's necessary. That's what we need. So, Dallas, good point. Appreciate your comment, and thank you for your continued support. Really appreciate it. All right, we're going back to episode 246 with a comment from another Gun Club member, Mark from Woodland, Washington. Thank you for episode 246. More Florida man nonsense, not involving a naked man in a chicken coop this time. It had me laughing as I ran through downtown Walla Walla, Washington, and I really needed that. Thank you, Mark. Yeah, Florida man is the gift that keeps on giving. He's always good for a laugh, and we thought it'd be a great way to close out the year with episode 246. Folks, if you want to understand, or you want to get an idea of what Mark is talking about and want to have a good laugh, go back all the way back to episode 173. We review I got the idea to review some really bizarre crime stories. We started doing these things called Crime and the 10 Commandments, where we take crime stories and self-defense stories and we try to apply the 10 Commandments to them. We see if we can draw some self-defense and some self-defense lessons out of them, and then maybe preach to the victims or the perpetrators to try to see what could be done to turn their lives around. And I got the idea, well, why don't we just do all Florida man stories? And that turned into episode 173, Preaching to Florida Man. And it was so much fun that we did it again in episode 229. And then we closed out last year with our final Clinging to God and Guns episode, episode 246, It's a Florida Man Christmas. And so if you want a fun, funny 3 episodes with some interesting life lessons and lessons about self-defense, and if, as one person told me, if you want to spit coffee through your nose, go listen to those Florida Man episodes. They're great fun. Mark, thank you again. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Florida Man, as you said, always good for a laugh, and I'm sure it's not the last we've heard of him on the show. So we'll see if we can't work him into the show here in 2021. As bad as 2021 has started out to be, I'm sure he's up to no good. All right, let's wrap up the show here with one from Brandon. Brandon writes in relation to our episode about pious and prudent rulers. This was episode 239. This message is in response to episode 239, comparing and contrasting Trump and Biden as the 2020 election drew near. In that episode, you casually mentioned that Trump is generally in favor of protecting 2A rights. I disagree with this statement. During the time that Trump was in office, he banned bump stocks. The ATF waffled back and forth on forearm braces as if they require federal registration. States began passing red flag laws, and Trump publicly supported them. He supported the TAPS Act. He placed an anti-2A person as the head of the ATF. He failed to come through on a campaign promise of national carry. Also, later on, I believe you posed an incorrect assumption of libertarians, specifically the statement centered around funding Planned Parenthood. Libertarians on your ballot this year is the only ticket that would give $0 in federal money to Planned Parenthood. Libertarians want to stop every penny of federal funds to the entire healthcare industry, including Planned Parenthood, so you mischaracterized the libertarian position. Perhaps you meant to say liberal instead of libertarian. Thank you for your time and consideration, Brandon. All right, lots to unpack here. First, thank you, Brandon, for this message. This is great stuff, and I appreciate you listening and giving me an opportunity here to sort of expand on what we said. First, let's talk about Trump and the Second Amendment. I stick to my characterization of Trump as generally pro-2A. Did he do some things that we disagreed with? Yes. Was he perfect? Absolutely not. The bump stock ban was stupid, and we even said this on the show. ATF waffling, though, was not Trump waffling. Although he is the head of the executive, he's not the head of the ATF. That agency is a disaster, and it has been for years. It needs to be shuttered. But the waffling wasn't because of something that Trump did. The waffling was because the NFA is stupid, and it's so badly written and so out of date, and the ATF has broad powers to interpret that law. And honestly, the NFA just needs to be repealed, in my opinion. So we need to get rid of the NFA, and honestly, we need to get rid of the ATF. Trump's support for red flag laws, again, I agree with you, stupid. But it, I think, reflects his general lack of understanding of most conservative issues and principles, and not a position on the Second Amendment. I think it's a general lack of political knowledge, because on their face, red flag laws sound good, and generally, it's my opinion that Trump really only understood things at a surface level and not much deeper. So I don't, as much as I disagreed with him there, I didn't totally fault him there. He read about them and he said, yeah, that sounds good, but didn't really understand the underlying issues like you and I would, who are immersed in the 2A community. As for the TAPS Act, this is the TAPS Act. I don't remember what TAPS stands for. I don't have a real thorough knowledge of it. I did a little brief research. It had broad bipartisan support, like 87 Republicans and 86 Democrats. And from what I could tell from reading the only 23 pages of the bill, it doesn't involve gun control, like at all. It's a bill to create a national task force on confronting mass violence using strategies that are already in place in other federal agencies. It also calls on the task force to disband in 180 days. It's not creating any new agencies, and it's talking about how do we How do we effectively coordinate and use existing federal, state, and local agencies to identify and deal with violent threats in the way that the Secret Service already does when they protect federal officials. In the preamble, they talk about using those same methods to protect our kids. So I don't know. I don't see it as a gun control bill. So if he supported it, again, I don't know how much he understood what it was, and I don't know how much is really there because it's only 23 pages. And most of it's definitions and preamble. So it seemed pretty tame. Maybe if I'm wrong, please correct me. His failure to come through on national concealed carry reciprocity. The president doesn't write legislation. And let's not forget that the GOP controlled the House and the Senate, and then Parkland happened. And there was absolutely no interest in the Hearing Protection Act or national concealed carry reciprocity. That went the way of the dodo as soon as Parkland happened. And you can blame that on the Republican leadership in the House and the Senate. I don't put that on Trump, because I think if it had come to his desk, he would have signed it. I have no reason to believe that he wouldn't have. But it's got to get to his desk first. So I don't put that on Trump. That's not his fault. At the same time, I still accept that Trump wasn't a perfect two-way president. Generally 2A, generally pro-2A, is not the same as staunchly pro-2A. I still think he is generally pro-2A. Now, as for my characterization of libertarians and Planned Parenthood, I need to go back and re-listen to kind of refresh my memory. But I believe my basic point was this. The libertarian position on Planned Parenthood, yeah, it's good. That's fine. No funding for Planned Parenthood, great. But we didn't really focus on that. One of the things that the hypothetical that we discussed was how would a libertarian president with no allies in Congress do anything about the abortion issue or even get Congress to defund Planned Parenthood? We were speaking specifically of the libertarian candidate, Joe Jorgensen, and making some hypotheticals about what might happen were she to be elected as president. She couldn't get a whole lot done on guns or on abortion because when you elect a president and she's got no members of her party, she doesn't have a coalition in Congress. I don't know who does she coalesce with? She might be able to get enough Republican support to defund Planned Parenthood, maybe, and that would be a great step. But here's the bigger point about libertarianism and about the Libertarian Party, specifically about Jo Jorgensen and her platform. She's pro-choice. Libertarianism ultimately puts the individual above everybody else and thinks that the unborn child inside the mother is not a person. Her position on abortion was that individuals own their own bodies and the state can't violate their right to do with their bodies whatever they want. And if whatever they want includes killing their unborn child, that's fine. Individuals should have the freedom, the rights, and the freedoms to decide whatever's best for them. And it doesn't include, the thinking apparently is that the unborn child is not separate from the mother. Therefore, the mother can make the decision whether or not to kill the child before it's born. That's morally reprehensible to me. And it's not a position that as a Christian I can support. And no Christian should have voted for her, despite her desire to defund Planned Parenthood. It's basically the only difference is who pays for it. You're still saying abortion is fine. And perhaps I did mean to say liberal, because honestly, I can't tell the difference between her position and the liberal position on abortion, except for who pays for it, like I said. So I hope that helps clarify a little bit. Looking back on it in hindsight, I wouldn't do anything different or make any different judgment. I still consider Trump to be generally pro 2A, not staunchly, generally. Certainly more pro 2A than Biden. And I don't know how he stacks up with Jorgensen, the libertarian candidate. I believe Jorgensen's stated position was preferable to Trump's, but then you get to the abortion issue, and her position on abortion is something morally I can't support. So that's looking back, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't say anything any different. And I hope that clarifies my position and what I was trying to get across there, Brendan. So thank you so much for your comments. I really appreciate your reaching out and continuing to listen to the show, and hope to hear from you again. And wherever you are, hope you're well and hope you're warm. All right, I think that's going to do it for today. Got a couple other questions, but I think I want to save those for when Pastor Bennett is here. They're a little more involved, and I would love to get his comments on them. If you have any comments or any questions that you would like to hear us discuss on the show, if you would like to comment on a previous episode, or if you have a topic that we haven't discussed, or if you haven't heard us discuss in enough detail, visit our feedback page at armedlutheran.us/feedback. We'd love to hear from you. You can leave us a voicemail or a voice message or send us an email, and we would love to respond to you in a future episode or comment on whatever topic that you propose. We would love to hear your thoughts. Again, thank you all so much for listening. For those of you who are still dealing with the effects of this crazy weather, just know that we're praying for you. We hope your situation improves soon. Those of you who are more fortunate, reach out to those around you who do need help. Pray for those in Texas and Louisiana and surrounding areas, Oklahoma, who are without power, who are dealing with water issues. Please keep those people in your prayers. Tune in again next week. We'll have another variety show with content from the entire cast: Sergeant Bill Sylvia, Mia Anstein, and Pastor John Bennett. Until then, keep shooting, keep praying. We'll talk to you next time.
For show notes, be sure to visit our website at www.armedlutheran.us. Check out the Facebook page, The Armed Lutheran, or join our Facebook group, Fans of Armed Lutheran Radio. If you like what you hear, please leave us a comment on our feedback page at armedlutheran.us/feedback, or a review on iTunes, and let us know what you think. Thank you for listening to Armed Lutheran Radio, a member of the Self-Defense Radio Network.